It was the greatest invasion in history, a bold plan to free the world from Hitler's tyranny. And John Bacon was there as a paratrooper in the 101st Airborne Division. The true story of one man's jump into history, next on People Near Here. Hello and welcome. Today we're in Plattsburgh, a small town in the northern Adirondacks, about an hour south of the Canadian border. Plattsburgh is a town full of interesting neighborhoods, and this is just one of them. This is the neighborhood where John Bacon lives. In fact, he lives right there in that house. John is an ordinary citizen of Plattsburgh. He's a fellow who's retired now. He used to be an auto mechanic. He's always paid his taxes, and he's kept his nose clean. So why should we want to introduce you to a fellow who's just an ordinary guy? Well, maybe it's because for several years during the 1940s, John put all of this on the line and went out to save the world. John Bacon was born into a farm family at Ogdensburg, New York, near the St. Lawrence Seaway, on June 22, 1922. Growing up, John did what most farm kids do. He did his chores, played with his younger brother, went to school, and wondered what he was going to be when he grew up. Little did John know, however, that just staying alive was going to be a big part of his future.
Well, we didn't have television, so you went to the movies and you saw the newsreels on the movies, and that was quicker and better than the newspapers. And yes, you knew that there was going to be a war, but everything came to a climax on December the 7th, when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor.
With Pearl Harbor, America was in the war full time, a war which was raging on two fronts, the Pacific and Europe. At first, John moved to Utica, New York, and went to work at the Savage Arms plant making Thompson machine guns. His was a critical defense plant job at a critical time. But it wasn't enough. John wanted to enlist, to get into the action. But no. His job in a defense plant wouldn't allow any enlistment, at least not in Utica. So John Bacon hopped a bus to Syracuse and practically ran into the first recruiting center he found.
And I went to the Marine recruiting station, and they asked me a lot of questions and an examination, and then they told me that I could not join the Marines because I was flat-footed. As I said, I played sports in high school, and football and track and hockey, and nobody ever told me I was flat-footed, and I just didn't believe it. So I walked out of there very dejected, and there was the Army office for recruiting. I went in there, and I simply said to the sergeant back at the desk, "Can a fellow with got flat feet join the Army?" And he says, "No, you can't." Well, I even felt lower then. And he says, "Sit down, take off your shoes." And he says, "You haven't got flat feet." But he says, "I can tell you why the Marines didn't want you, because your feet are too big." And so I wear a 14 shoe. And so there was this poster up over his desk, probably was 6 foot square, and it showed a soldier jumping out of an airplane. So I simply said, "What's that?" And he says, "That's the paratroops." And he says, "If you enlist in the paratroops," he says, "nobody gets drafted there. That's all enlistments." And he says, "You get paid $50 extra a month." I says, "Sign me up. That's for me."
In basic training, one of the first things John learned how to do was disassemble, clean, and reassemble the Thompson machine gun, the very weapon he used to make back in Utica. The Thompson would be with him throughout his wartime career. Next came the trickier lessons, the lessons on jumping out of an airplane.
Now, my first jump over an airplane was quite unique, I think it was, and it helped me a lot, because we had gone through mock jumping out of 35-foot towers and all this. We were taught the stance to stand in the plane door, and we all on the ground, of course, that is. But then, come Monday morning, and that was the day we were supposed to make your first jump. It's 5 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You make your 5 jumps, and Saturday you get your wings. Well, Monday morning, it was raining. You can't jump in the rain. And the reason why you can't jump in the rain is because when you step out behind that motor, that prop blast, and it's wet, the chutes they don't open. Too much wet. So they come Tuesday, and it's still raining. So I'm 2 jumps down then. Wednesday morning, it's clear. So with the name of Bacon, you're kind of pretty near the first in the roster. So down to Lawson Field, got my chute, up I went, and out the door I went. I did just the way they told me. And chute open, down I come. I made a perfect landing. And I laid on my back, and I looked back up, and I says, "Who said this was tough?" And so rolled up my chute, got on a truck, went back to the hangar, packed my chute, and at 10 o'clock I made my second jump. And then after that I did the same thing. I packed the chute again, and at 3 o'clock I made my third jump, all in one day. When I graduated from jump school, got the boots and the wings. They didn't give you those wings. You worked for them. And I felt very privileged that I was a paratrooper. Yeah.
The war was heating up on both fronts. Soon it became clear to the Allies that the only way of defeating Hitler was on his own doorstep. So a bold plan was devised. Codenamed Operation Overlord, the top-secret scheme called for nothing less than a full-scale invasion of Europe. It would come here, on the Normandy coast of German-occupied France. In one bold move, the Allies hoped to gain a crucial toehold on enemy-held territory, and the paratroopers would lead the way. Among them, in H Company of the 501st Parachute Regiment, which was part of the 101st Airborne Division, would be Sergeant John Bacon. John, what do you think this is?
Well, this brings back a lot of memories.
Yeah? What is it?
Your good old C-47.
Uh-huh. And when's the last time you saw a C-47?
The last time I saw a C-47 would be September the 17th, 1944. And when I jumped into Holland, that was my last ride in one of these.
Yeah? Well, let's go around back and see if... does this bring back memories for you, huh?
Well, it sure does.
John made 2 combat jumps during World War II, but his first came in the early morning hours of June 6, 1944, D-Day. As a platoon leader, he was to take charge of 30 men and then jump behind enemy lines. His orders were simple and explicit: parachute into the night, rendezvous with the rest of the platoon on the ground, and then seek and destroy the enemy. And you guys would have been, you called these planes not airplanes, but sticks.
No, each group of men was a stick. You didn't classify them as a platoon, a company, or any group. This plane load of men, paratroopers, was called a stick.
And how many paratroopers were in here? A plane like this?
17 or 18.
17 or 18?
That's right.
And what were you wearing? Well, how much weight? How much stuff?
100 pounds.
So there was you plus 100 pounds of stuff.
Yeah.
Parachute, a reserve chute.
Yes. Paratroopers' law or rules, or Army, said that you must wear a parachute on your back and a reserve chute on your front. But this is something that paratroopers, some did and some didn't. I can speak for myself. When I went out that plane door and jumped into combat, I did not wear a reserve chute.
Why?
Well, the reserve chute, we were jumping at approximately 550 feet.
550 feet?
Feet, that's right. They bring you in low.
At night?
At night.
You had a full moon.
Right. But at the same time I realized that that chute isn't going to open. It's already too late anyhow. My thoughts and my feelings the night before D-Day, I wanted to be alone for a short period of time. There's an old saying, there's no atheist in a foxhole. Of course, I was not married. I did not have any responsibilities at home. I had a younger brother, 2 years younger than I was. He was also in the service, but in the Pacific. So it was just myself. I've always said nobody ever did any more praying than I ever did. But we had a job to do. We were trained to do that job. And we did that job the best we could.
While the invasion did take the Germans by surprise, they were not caught totally unprepared. Shore batteries and other defenses ran the length of France. The beaches had been heavily fortified after a directive from Hitler himself warned of a possible invasion by the Western Allies. Undaunted, on the 6th of June, the paratroopers led the way into a well-rehearsed but uncertain future. A future where turning back was out of the question. Hands on the outside.
Right.
And I notice your toes are hanging over there.
Right.
What, did somebody tap you on the back or
No.
nothing?
When you came to the door and in this position, you went.
So once you got there, boom, you were gone.
Gone.
Because
That's
there was
right.
a guy right behind you.
He's right on my back. Right. But plus the fact, when I am in this position, and that prop blast for that motor,
He'd like suck you right out of the
suck
airplane.
you right out of the airplane.
How fast could you empty this aircraft of paratroopers? I mean, how quickly would you guys exit this plane?
18 guys, 18 seconds.
No kidding.
Yeah. One man, every man, 1 second. You have, from the time you get to the door, it's 1 second, you're gone.
So you don't really have time to think about it.
It's a job of procedure and training. And you've done this many times, and it comes automatic.
How's it feel?
I got.
How's it feel, Stan?
It feels fantastic, but I got to tell you one thing. As I look here and up in that corner of that plane, on the right-hand corner where the seat was, that's where I always sat.
You were the last man.
I'm the last man out. I always sat on the right-hand side in the last seat up there. Yeah, but
So you were
you
always
come in
the
the door,
last
gone.
Did you ever little prayer or say any Geronimo, anything, or just go?
I said one thing, open, you son of a bitch, open. But when my chute opened, the first thing I looked for, where's the airplane? And I got the direction the airplane was, and then I looked down at the ground to see where I was going to land. And so when I was on the ground, I was already oriented in which direction to go in. From the time I got out of my harness, in a matter of about 3 minutes, I encountered a 7 or 8 man German patrol, but I was running at that time in the direction to get back with the other guys, and I know I got a couple of them, but I just kept on because I was only one person against 7 or 8, and so I already had the momentum of running, and I just kept on going, and so that was my first encounter. The first job was to assemble, to get together, and get to the causeways and seize them. And the causeways are like a earthen bridge, so that the tanks coming in from the beach could go right over and wouldn't have to hold up. That was our primary objective. Yeah. And a good friend of mine, Sergeant Cheney from G Company, him and I were walking side by side, and a sniper got him right in the back of the head, and because he was dead instantly. And at that same time, I dove into the ditch on the other side, and the bullet went right through between my big toe and my next toe. It went in the bottom of my boot and go through the top. I've told that story many times, and many people have asked me, "When you go to a hospital?" There was no hospital. If there was any, it was a German hospital. I wasn't going to go there. Then in Carentan, I got shot through the side, but I went right between 2 ribs and came out my back. It just went under the skin and out the back. I had an awful sore side for a while, but I had no danger of dying from it or anything like that. Several days after that, going down a dirt road, and the Germans were lobbing in some mortar shells on us. Well, this mortar shell landed on this gravel road because it threw stones all over. Well, a stone hit me in the side of the nose, broke my nose and that. But we had a medic with us, and he grabbed me and straightened it. It's still straight now. He did a good job. At the same time, a very good sergeant that I was a very good friend of, walking down the road, and all of a sudden you look over there, and there his head was rolling down the road. He was decapitated, but
Decapitated by what?
by a mortar shell. Yeah. So
Horrible.
yes, it's horrible, but that is part of war. We were taught, we were told that the most important thing is the objective. It's not your life or mine. It's get the job done. Yes, when a good friend of yours gets killed, you cannot stop and mourn. You cannot stop and do anything. You got a job to do, and you do it. But
Did you ever think it's going to happen to you? Did you ever think?
No.
You didn't think it was
no. You never think it's going to happen to you.
The other guy's going to get it.
Oh, yeah. But
Never you.
Never me. No, I'm going to make it.
And you were wounded 3 times during the Normandy jump.
Yeah.
You were wounded in Bastogne, which finally got you home.
I got wounded in Holland too.
And then you got wounded on another jump in Holland.
Yeah.
And you survived all of that.
Yeah.
You survived all of that.
Yeah.
You're also a cancer survivor.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, I am.
You have a pacemaker.
Yes, I have.
You're one of the luckiest people I've ever met, John.
I think I am too.
Is that luck or fate? What is that?
I can't answer that question. The only thing is, life has been good to me. I've had my ups and downs, but on the total line, I'm a lucky person to still be here.
There's one, though, really remarkable end note to all of this, and that is the story about the fellow who was in your platoon. You were his platoon sergeant. What was his name?
Sergeant Nyland.
Sergeant Nyland. And over a period of time, he found out that he lost, how many brothers?
He lost 3 brothers in a period of time.
In just a period of a few weeks.
Right.
And so the Army wanted him to go home
Right.
because they didn't want to have 4 dead brothers.
That's right. That's right.
And so he went home.
They sent him home.
And 50 years later, this man who was in your platoon was the subject of a very famous movie.
The movie is Saving Private Ryan.
So you're Private Ryan's sergeant.
Right.
Only he was called, his real name was Nyland.
His real name was Frederick Nyland. Yep.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I think it's too, because to repeat your words of 50-some years ago, and this is that many years later, I'm still here. I mean, all I gotta say is this: the man upstairs is taking care of me.
After the war, John returned home, got married, settled down, and bought a gas station. But in the early 50s, he was called up again during the Korean conflict. In a gruesome firefight, John was seriously wounded in the leg. But he would survive, and it would prove to be his ticket out of hell, once and for all. Today, nearly half a century later, John still has a box of medals, including the Purple Heart, hanging on the wall in his family room. But hanging in his heart are some things more important. They are the names of his buddies, his comrades in arms from a bygone era when the line between good and evil was always more clearly drawn, and freedom was worth dying for, as long as the survivors never forgot.
All these officers were killed in World War II. None of them come home. And we go back over here, and this is Logan. He didn't come home. Lenny Lloyd didn't come home. Fred didn't come home. That's Fred Anasuski from Syracuse. And these boys here, there's 3 that didn't come home. Wyckoff came home. These 4 here, they didn't come home. Clarence Felt, he's still around. He's like me. These 3 here, they didn't come home at all. Back here. Coming down through here, he didn't come home. He didn't. Reggie Alexander, California. Reggie's still around. Norby Nelson's here. These 2 boys here, they didn't make it. Milburn Young, I saw his grave
In Belgium, in France, in Luxembourg, in Italy, in fact, all over the world, there are cemeteries that hold the remains of Americans, men and women, who gave the last full measure of their devotion, defending freedom during its hour of maximum danger. That's what John Bacon did. That's what veterans always do. The last full measure to defend freedom. May we suggest then that the next time you see John or any veteran, that you take his or her hand, you shake it, and you say, thank you. It is something that we cannot do enough, and for some veterans, it's something they have yet to hear. Thank you for defending freedom. Thank you for protecting our way of life. For videographer Paul Frederick, I'm Derek Muirden saying thanks to you for watching, and we hope that you'll tune in again next time when we'll introduce you to some more interesting people near here.